Hello and welcome everyone to this webinar. I'm your host for this evening. My name is Dawn Walter and I'm the founder of the Anthropology and Technology Conference, which is taking place online this year on Friday, 9th of October. The conference brings together leading national and international experts from the social sciences and technology to champion responsible AI. And there are three streams this year: health tech, fintech, and smart cities. Ivana is one of our three panel experts at the conference. She has recently written a book on artificial intelligence called An Artificial Revolution on Power, Politics and AI, which I interviewed her about for the conference website. I'll post some links in the chat a bit later on. I thought it'd be really good to have Ivana talk to us about her book. I really do recommend it. It's packed with insight and expert knowledge, a whistle-stop tour through all the pressing issues in this space, well written and easy read, short and full of passion, as you'd expect from Ivana. I first met Ivana when I attended the Women Leading in AI conference in London last November, and hand on heart, it was probably one of the best AI conferences I've been to. I'd highly recommend you check out and get involved in the Women Leading in AI network, and I'll post the link later on. And Alison Gardner, her co-founder, is also talking in the health tech stream at the Anthropology and Technology Conference. Ivana is the Technical Director of Privacy at Deloitte, and she has worked in privacy and data governance for many, many years for the NHS, Sky, Barclays, and now Deloitte. She has degrees in political science and law. So before we start, a quick reminder of the agenda. I'll be asking Ivana questions for about 30 minutes until about 7:05, and then we'll open up the floor to questions from you. There are about 80 people, I think, who've signed up for tonight, and we only have 30 minutes for the Q&A. If you want to ask a question in the chat, select Kerry Harrison from the drop-down list and send your question directly to Kerry Harrison, who is co-hosting tonight. And then Kerry will pose as many questions as we have time to Ivana. So right, let's get started. Ivana, thank you so very much for being with us. I'm really excited to share your book and your thinking with everyone here tonight. Right, I need to unmute.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invite. It's really my pleasure to be with you. It's in such sort of weird, incredible times we are in at the moment for so many different reasons. But thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for all the work that you do, Dawn, because it's with your conference, and it's really good how much you're trying to really put human values at the center of everything. It's really important.
Thank you, Ivana. Thank you. So for people who haven't read the book, why did you write it, and what questions did you want to answer?
Yeah, so I wrote this book because I'm a proud feminist, and that is the first reason. I'm a proud feminist and who loves technology and works technology to work for everybody. I wrote this book because I wanted to address the huge power asymmetries that underpin our digital world. A world where the digital dividends have not been shared equally between people, and a world where we still see, everywhere we see algorithms automating bias, algorithms automated discrimination, and even automated poverty. So I wanted to go really down to understand what is happening out there, and really talk about data and talk about artificial intelligence, not just as technological tools, but as tools of power. And in fact, I do say that AI is much more than technology. AI is all about power. And when it's about power, and when it's about power asymmetries, that's where my feminist background comes in, because feminism is all about smashing those asymmetries. And so that's where it comes from. It comes from my roots and sort of the feminist thinking, and the idea that the digital dividends have not benefited everyone, and we need to really look at the asymmetries there in the digital world. And it comes from my background, this is my professional background, which is in privacy and in data. And I just wanted to bring all this together, but I also wanted to pay tribute to all these amazing women, especially women, who are working so hard to put humanity, human values and dignity and ethics are the heart of technology. There are so many. And it's important, if we think about facial recognition, the idea that women like Joy Bullambrini, they've been fighting for years to say, look, facial recognition is biased. And now what you see years later, you see Amazon, IBM saying, hold on, we're going to stop selling facial recognition products to the police. So I wanted to really say, that's what we can achieve together. This is what they've been capable of achieving. And I wanted to do all this in a way that was easy to understand. And because I want people to talk about power, to talk about AI, to talk about technology. And I want this topic to be discussed at the kitchen table, at the pub, because technology, AI is not just tech, it's really about the future of our shared humanity. So I want everyone to be involved.
And it's a perfect book to read because, as I said earlier, it's so well written and it's full of passion and it's short. So that's fantastic. So can you explain what feminism means to you and why it's so key in the way that we think and talk about AI?
Yeah, so feminist to me is all about power distribution. And I think, I come from a family where feminism has been really important, and I grew as a feminist. I developed my understanding of what it means to tackle the asymmetry of power in society. And when I talk about asymmetry of power in the digital space, I talk about the fact that we have machines, that I call them machines, but I'm talking about algorithms, I talk about software, that are very, very powerful at the moment. And they have so much and know so much about us. They can be used by ingesting a lot of data to predict behavior. And they are so powerful compared to how human we are. So there is a massive asymmetry between what these machines can do and what we as humans, we have remained the same we were 1,000 years ago, with the same feelings of rage and anger and love, so, but these machines have become very powerful. So that's the first asymmetry. Feminism to me is all about looking at these asymmetries and redistributing power in a way that things benefit everyone, and in this case, women. I also have to say though, and that one thing that I'm looking at the moment, and I think a lot of people, and I would hope that a lot of people are also looking at right now, is how feminism needs to be more intersectional. Yeah. And I started this journey in my book a little bit when I started to talk about how when we talk feminism and we need to be fundamentally intersectional. And my experience as a white woman is very different from my experience as a Black woman. And now more than ever with what's going on, this is the right moment to really question ourselves. And I am questioning myself thoroughly, and I have over the last few years in terms of how intersectional I am. And especially when it comes to algorithms and the technical side of this, Dawn, because yes, it's a philosophical argument, it's a practical argument, but it's also very technical, because then when it comes, for example, to recognize bias in algorithms, it's very easy to say, well, you can't use discrimination law because you can't discriminate against somebody from the color of their skin. But what about intersectionalism? What about all those things that, that create really true a sense of an intersectional dimension of how power plays out? And so it's really important, I think, that we do have this conversation, because especially right now at when we're talking about race so much, and that's great, but also when we talk about class and in the aftermath of COVID, where we've seen all of this completely laid bare in our societies.
Yeah, haven't we just?
Yeah,
I think it's been such an interesting time, because, as you say, COVID has just sort of ripped open the social fabric, and then what's happened in America has really sort of laid bare, the issue of colour.
But also, Dawn, the thing is, our response to COVID is what worries me, because our response to COVID-19 is built on the trends that we were seeing in society before the pandemic, which I describe in the book. Is surveillance. and techno-solutionism. So techno-solutionism, surveillance, identification. All these trends, they've been underpinning the digital world as we know it. And it's not by chance, to be honest, that I was thinking about this today. I was thinking, well, actually, the majority of the AI development that we've seen over the last few years, they've all been in the area of punishment and surveillance. Whereas I would like AI to be really in the field of health and really improving all that. And we've got massive difficulties there for many different reasons. But the as we respond to COVID, and we respond by really using building on these trends, that's what worries me. Because if there is one thing that has really changed, I think, with COVID, is the idea that we're all interconnected and interdependent on each other. And we should build on that and rethink the way that we are digital citizenship in this space. But I'm worried about building on those trends. I'm worried about automation and digitization now progressing at rapid speed as people try to survive in a post-COVID era. And with automation progressing at rapid speed, I do ask myself, will we have the checks and balances that we normally have in place? The World Economic Forum just a couple of days ago issued a strong warning, said, hold on a second, when you procure AI products and you do now in a hurry, how are we making sure that these products are not biased? They don't have, and so it's really important. And by the way, I call it bias, but it's too soft. I mean, it's algorithmic racism. It's algorithmic chauvinism. It's not bias. Bias is a very nice and nuanced word from a technical perspective, but we should call it for what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I mean, that is the worry, isn't it, at the moment, that things will be pushed through very, very quickly without any oversight or regulation. And that is a concern.
Exactly, and that is the problem. I mean, and a lot of people are saying this, and it's important that we take that into account because I mean, we've seen it with the COVID app and the tracing, and there'd be interesting to see what people think about that, because again, their response to COVID-19 with the app was very telling. First of all, because it looked like the answer to COVID was, or the validity of a product was more down to the cryptographer than to the epidemiologist. So excuse me, this is a health issue, and so I want to have a clear opinion coming from the epidemiologist in terms of, do we need this or not? But to an extent, it was almost like we were like rushing into a solution, something that had the flavor of, we must do something. And without that sort of, I hadn't heard a sort of clarity around, yes, we need this from an epidemiological perspective. We probably do, and if we do, great, let's go ahead with it. But the entire debate around the app was, I think, very much telling of what is the risk that we're facing. People are rightly concerned that COVID data today could become surveillance data tomorrow. You can't blame them. How can you blame them?
No.
I mean, years ago, there was research data, and then it turned out to be used as manipulation data by Facebook. So who knows what the hell data today could be useful tomorrow? And you can't blame people for that. It's actually good that we were talking about this. And I was saying, well, actually, gosh, things have changed. We are talking about this, all these scandals, all these broken promises from a privacy perspective, they are taking us somewhere. So people are actually talking about this. And then I thought it was very good. And we can't blame people for asking these questions. I do think, and I mean, I know I get very controversial on this, but if I can go on, Dawn, if you don't mind.
You go on, absolutely.
And I love to hear what people say about this, because this has really tormented me for a few weeks. So on this app, this COVID app, I've been really confused about this, because I personally was very much thinking, okay, if the epidemiologists say we need this app, I was thinking, well, let's create a centralized app, because all the data goes centrally. Public health is very important. They can tell us where, the trends and identify the spots. And so I've been very sort of conflicted about this. on the one end, I was like, well, yes, I mean, actually, data is important, it's a public asset. It needs to be centralized. On the other end, I was like, well, actually, I've worked in privacy for too long to know that there have been too many broken promises from a privacy perspective. And that's why I want a decentralized app. So that's been quite conflicting for a lot of people, I think. And to me, this last few weeks have been quite telling in that respect, because I was thinking, how do we, once again, they are pitching privacy versus health, as in the aftermath on 9/11, they were pitching privacy versus security. And I don't like this dichotomies. I really don't, because there is no dilemma there. There's no trade-off because there is no dilemma. You can have both. And that's where we as a country, we missed an enormous opportunity, because I was really, really clear that we needed legislation to say, okay, this is the app, this is what can, and this is what cannot be done with this app. We need regulation, legislation, expedite rule on this, because without oversight, without control, without accountability, how can people trust? How can people really believe that what is happening is for the common good? And we've missed that opportunity to really say, okay, we all do this together. We all download this app, but we guarantee you, through oversight, to the possibility for citizens to intervene, for clear sunset clauses that can be checked, that this is happening in the right way. And by not doing that, we're continuing to feed this dichotomy between privacy and health, which is so dangerous. Because honestly, if the question is between privacy and life, people will choose life, but at what cost? This is why this sort of dichotomy between the two is really dangerous, because it doesn't allow us to see things in the right way. So this has been my thinking over the last few weeks. And I do think, that was an opportunity that was missed. But I do worry, because of what we've seen on this COVID app, because of the proliferation of tools that are in the market right now, where they can apparently they can recognize whether your cough is a COVID cough or not. And so with all these tools emerging, okay, how a company going to know which product to deploy or not? Because you've got to say, okay, I'm going to sacrifice, I'm going to use personal data if there is a purpose for doing so. But how do you know that there is the purpose? Because how do you know that this cough recognizing tool works or not? So how do you, and I'm worried about the speed at which we will progressing. At the same time, though, there is an increased demand for transparency, an increased demand for social justice, for sure. And the intersection between technology and social justice is quite huge. And I just wish that was sort of came out a little bit stronger.
Yeah. Can you talk about, because in the book you talk about your perspectives around privacy and your view. I just want to talk to you a bit because that is your background, privacy. So your view is that privacy is a great collective good rather than a selfishly individual one. And I think that's a really important. So can you share your thoughts around that issue, that concept?
Yeah, well, it's very much of a personal journey as well. I started to get involved in privacy when I was abroad, and I was studying abroad, and I was really shocked because the proliferation of CCTV cameras at the time. And I just felt the need to protect and safeguard myself and the movement. I just didn't want, some sort of unknown source to know my whereabouts. So I started like that, and then I went into sort of the wider sort of human rights and government and other things, and then privacy from a human rights standpoint. But then I think I started to evolve my thinking because I just think that the individual approach to privacy, which is about safeguarding your own personal data, there is a human right there in your right to private life, which is obviously enshrined in the law. But there is something around I started to realize that when people were kept asking me, oh, you're in privacy, you're studying privacy, you must be so protecting about your personal data, not sharing anything. And then I was thinking, well, no, really. I'm like, I'm not that careful. Why is that? And I was thinking, because I don't really see privacy as my own data as a value. I see privacy as a collective good, so that we safeguard privacy as a way of being together as a society. And for example, with COVID, when we realized that, you know, we are so interconnected, and where if I go out and I spend 10 minutes talking to you and the close distance, then my data are so important because you may be infected and you need to know. So then I was thinking, well, we surely need to treat data as a collective asset and a collective, well, and the protection of personal data also becomes a safeguarding on people's dignity. And so that's how my thinking really changed over the years, you know, and I moved away from the consent model as well. So I was thinking, I've always been thinking, well, there's something completely broken here. I mean, I just the thought of consent and having to go through pages of privacy notices that nobody understands, and they are deceitful by design, because they're so complex, they're so difficult, and it's not happening by chance. I mean, most companies, they do it like that because it's, you know, that's how it is. And the journey of online is so complicated, and people end up, and correctly so, they end up just clicking yes, I accept, because they want to reach. It's a profound rethinking. And obviously the individual approach to private control, it can't work in this world that we live in. You know, how can we navigate through a smart home to a smart car and then use our phones to pay, and at the same time having to click yes or no, yes or no, yes or no? I mean, it's just not doable. So I would like to move to a different situation where we they are delivering. So that could be data trips. I'm sort of but in the more we digitize model, the discussion that we're having at the moment around transparency, what does it mean, transparency? I had on algorithms. So what I fear that transparency is going to fail and needed the most. Let's say there's an automated way of assigning loans, or an automated way to assign housing priorities, and then and that's done by a machine, and they say, well, that's the transparency. We explain to you how this is done. How's that going to help? So not everyone is going to be able to understand that. So there is a lot of rethinking. I know that there is some interesting work going on around group privacy, and the idea that we look at how a particular technological development may impact on group of individuals. And that's a really interesting new development, which again has issues from an intersectional perspective. But it's really, but we do need, you know, to move on, and especially because a lot of ethical issues around AI and data, around AI then relate and concern the use of personal data. So we have to really, I think, improve our thinking in relation to privacy and how we view it. So to me, is a massive sort of collective asset.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ivana. We lost you a little bit there. I think just for the people who aren't, I think we had an electrical storm over here in Bristol, so I was worried that I'd lose the power and you might be having a storm over you, so that's probably why you faded in and out, in case anybody's not from England and not having an electrical storm at this point in time. So one of the arguments you make in your book is that we need an anti-AI I movement, and I wanted to explore that in the interview that we did. We didn't have time. So can you explore with us what you mean by that now?
So first I was seeing a question from Ishani saying the point of transparency before this went audible. So should I just say that again?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So what I was saying about transparency is that I've always felt that transparency may fail exactly the people who need it the most, because it depends on what we define as transparency. But if, for example, there is an automated decision-making system that makes decision on whether somebody has access to a loan or housing, let's say one of those big things that define equality in life, so housing, education, health, and then somebody's denied a particular access, which is potential harm of AI, exclusion, being locked out. And then we say we have to be transparent, let people know if a decision is made by a machine. But the problem is these are complex pieces of information. So that transparency may actually fail the people who need that transparency, because they're exactly those who are more vulnerable, and they are exactly the ones that end up at risk, or they are more at risk of being locked out. But if transparency is so complex because it requires the disclosure of very technical information, then it becomes a very complex matter. So that's why sometimes when I work with organizations, I say, well, let's define transparency in a way that is accessible to people. The thing that you were asking about that is an academic exercise in my mind, and something that I wanted to explore, because AI has got an amazing potential. It's great, in terms of in health, despite all the problems that we've got. But I am looking at some real good developments in healthcare. And AI has been around for a long, long time. What has changed is the computing power and the huge amount of data. But what I worry about is that at the moment, the way that we're using artificial intelligence is not for those glorious things. It's not for the environment saving. It's not for to tackle climate change. Let me be clear. There is work going on that. But the majority of AI development, I know I'm controversial on this. I always get people shouting at me, but it's fine because I like being polemical. But the majority of the AI algorithmic driven stuff is all been in computing, advertising, and surveillance. Basically, this means how to brainwash you and manipulate you, hack into your weaknesses, hack into your own personal interest, create a synthetic profile on you, and campaign to sell you or for political ideologies based on those, by hacking into your weak points. This is what we've seen over the last few years. And then we've seen surveillance, facial recognition improving, how to monitor employees so that their behavior is locked at every single moment of their working day, how to make sure that we've got facial recognition technologies in place everywhere. And even if people have got masks, so we're so sophisticated that we can even think and conceive ideas about this. So I repeat this, that my view is that too much of the energy spent over the last few years in the so-called AI arena has been around computing, advertising, and facial recognition, surveillance in general.
Yeah.
And I do worry about that, because I would like to see the real change happening in other sectors. So what I'm saying is, why don't we have a movement that says, well, hold on a moment, that's not right. AI, we can use it for the environment, and now we can use it for health, to improve the way we live. And to an extent, AI is something that requires governance, and it does at global level. And I'm happy that some initiatives have started just over the last couple of days globally. And what if we look, for example, at nuclear? Nuclear has been something completely different, obviously, but yet something where we have been able to, as nations, to sit around the table and say, what do we use it for, and what do we decide that we're not going to use it for? With all the difficulties and political and geopolitical implications that are obvious to everyone. But when there are things that are possible about automation, for example, the idea of dehumanizing a killing with an automated weapon, making you as a human completely autonomous from killing, when this is a possibility, why aren't we discussing this in a sort of international fora? Why aren't we putting some rules, some ground rules, and defining what AI is for and what is not? You know, so that was more of a sort of an exercise in saying, why don't we have an anti-AI movement, which would actually be quite useful, because it's by discussing and negotiating that you get to the better position, you know, to a better position. And so I do think it's quite important that we bring in sort of an international element. And I was pleased to say that I think I saw that a couple of days ago, that, you know, it's been the first attempt, an international group of people meeting and nations talking about future governance of AI at global level. So there's it's happening slowly.
So if we see AI as an ideology rather than a technology, so we're anti the ideology rather than anti the technology. That's what you mean, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, I mean, AI is both a technology and an ideology. That's the thing, you know. So it's becoming an ideology, and I think I'm a bit concerned about this sort of proliferation of these very glamorous tools that are happening, especially in the field of surveillance. And at the moment where surveillance is a big debate. You know, I'm very much, you know, crying for a moratorium of surveillance, and I get. Do you know why? Because I'm saying everybody's focusing on the bias. Yes, it can't recognize Black women. Yes, we've got to fix that. But once we fix that, is it a problem? Or do we really want this or not? Because the problem is the fact that something is technologically possible doesn't mean that you've got to deploy it. You know, and the same with facial recognition as well. Do we want to be monitored, and where? And so having a camera looking at you, or even thinking that you might be surveilled, that changes the way you behave, changes the way you interact with others and with your public spaces. So do we want that? That's, you know, that's a big question. And that's why I think it's not just about algorithmic fixes, technology. It's really about stopping for a moment to say, what do we want this for? You know, it says, are we sure that we want to introduce this? I mean, I'm all in favor of facial recognition in an airport. But do I need it on the street when I go out for a walk with my friends? No, thank you. So.
Yeah, absolutely. We're almost running out of time for our questions, and I want to leave some space for everybody else. But I do want to I think that kind of segues quite nicely into one of your chapters is on algorithms and the rise of populism, and that human rights and democracy is collateral damage in the ongoing battle for technological advancement. And you know, can you talk about that, especially in the light of the upcoming presidential elections in the States and the power of Facebook to help Trump win the election, which it seems they did in 2016? That scares me.
I mean, it's an interesting question. I mean, it's really, so again, it goes back to what I say, said just now, that, you know, basically it's AI has been for computing, advertising / manipulation and surveillance. And sadly, this is what we've seen the most of the developments, isn't it? I mean, we've got, when I talked about asymmetry at the beginning, you know, we've got algorithms that are so powerful that they can predict whether, you know, you are a risk of a manic crisis. I mean, look at the Cambridge Analytica stuff. I mean, look at the kind of algorithms that were used. You know, if you were classified as an animal lover, they would send you adverts to show that, you know, you are how Europe was terrible at slaughtering animals, you know. So it's and that's where the power is, not because it requires intelligence just particular, you have to be very clever, but it's the amount of data, you know, that they can extract. They can identify and segment people in different, and this has always happened in advertising, obviously, you know, it's always happening. But now the scale of it and the ability to really harvest all this data, the data extractivist model that underpins Facebook, you know, and digital advertising ecosystem is that. So obviously what's happened is there's a system that rewards hate, that rewards division, and instead of empathy. And obviously populist messages, they thrive. They really thrive. It's their place. So and that is the system. Now there are changes being taken. So for example, I think just today Facebook announced that people can switch off receiving political ads, and there are baby steps that are being taken because of the scrutiny is huge on these companies. But there is a major question that we need to ask ourselves, and I know it's not an easy one to answer, and we need, and it's the following. I mean, I think with this crisis, it's become very clear that these major tech companies have become part of our national infrastructure. Amazon has been delivering essentials. Facebook has been keeping us informed with a lot of fake news as well, but you know, it's getting us informed. Twitter and all that. Now Amazon has moved on to loans to small, medium businesses. So these companies, they are becoming very much part of our digital infrastructure. And I'm wondering, now they are become part of this sort of digital infrastructure, shouldn't they be treated as such, like public utilities? And that is a big question that we've got to answer ourselves, you know, so say, what are they, this big tech, what are they? And it's a question that we can't, they need answering, and quickly. There's some good questions. I've lost you. You're on mute, Dawn.
I had a cough, so I was trying to not cough over everybody. So if you can see the question, do you want to pick the ones you answer, or shall I read them?
So well, as I'll try and answer. I'm wondering about the real-time power of the AI, COVID. Well, yes, I mean, that's, Francesca, that is a good question. So the problem with COVID is, I mean, AI can help. The problem, we haven't got enough data, and you're right about that. And a lot of the AI products that we are developing, they work in a testing lab, but they don't work in the real world for exactly that reason. So that's why we need more data, and that's why we need responsible data sharing. And yes, the risk is, as you say, is bias and data not being representative. The expectations of AI are too high. Yes, they are, and I think that's completely correct. AI could probably help next pandemic, but for sure it can help with sort of predictive analytics, looking at a lot of data that we can collect now and moving on. But that's one of the availability of data in health is one of the issues where I think it's really important to look at data as a collective asset, isn't it? You know, so I think there are three things that we need in health, I think. One is accountability 2.0. So we need accountability 2.0 when it comes to health data. And this is because we need people to trust the way that our data is shared. And that's really important. Then also we need responsible data sharing, and responsible data sharing really means also looking at the socio-economic infrastructure and the segment of the populations where it comes to that are affected when the impact on specific communities when we do data sharing. And third, I think we need new data infrastructures when it comes to handling health data. So India doesn't have a data protection law. It does not, but there is it's been debated. So in digital advertising in election, that's really an interesting question. So, I mean, the harms of AI in digital advertising and election were these. So as I said before, these algorithms are powerful. And it all depends on the use of data and the use that you make of them. So if you can identify whether, for example, somebody is at risk of having a mental breakdown, you can identify that because of, patterns. This is how machine learning works, patterns. What do you do with a piece of information? If you use that piece of information to sell them or to target them with adverts about betting shops, because we know that at that time, when you are having a mental breakdown, you're more likely to spend money. So obviously these are the dangers. These are they're inherent in this ecosystem, because it's a digital architecture of persuasion, which is built on the ability of this massive algorithms and powerful algorithms to hack into our weaknesses. So you could say, I am going to understand who hates immigrants, and then target them without saying, okay, this government wants to do this, open up the doors to immigrants. Now, people will say, this all happened, this is the political discourse, this is political campaigning. Fine, that's true, partially. But the risk is that this is really increasing it and scaling it up. So the harms of AI, it's an harms on an individual, which is an harms of exclusion, being locked out, but it's also what is a harm of manipulation, a harm of representational harm by perpetuating stereotypes. And on top of that, you can add the fake news, you can add the deep fakes, and then the world becomes even more complicated. And then there is a question around accountability in the AI system. That is a very, very important question, and that's a question where actually we can all work. We can all help and work together, because I don't think we've got a solution yet. So I always say this: I'm not an engineer, right? So if I go on a plane because I want to fly to see my parents in Italy, I don't go on the plane and open the engine and look at how it is. I go on the plane because I trust that somebody has followed due process when building that engine, because somehow the due process, the due diligence has been enshrined in a document, in a standard, and because a third party has been audited that system before the plane could fly. I want the same. I want the same happening to AI. I want this exactly the same thing. I want to see systems. Of course, not all AIs are the same. Obviously, if it's but something, for example, that has to do with crucial things like access to housing, access to health, precision medicine. Whether you are. Those are such important things. Access to a loan and to your own house. It's massive things that can have a massive impact on you as an individual. So in these areas, I always say, we need some clear accountability, and that does not mean placing the burden onto the individual. Because if accountability in AI means that it comes up to me to look at an audit an algorithm, or it comes up to me to look every single thing and every single, then no, thank you. It's not. I don't want to have to do that. I don't want people having to do that. I want to be able to trust, because somewhere I have it demonstrated that that particular system has gone through the right due diligence. So we haven't figured out that yet. And of course, it can't be across all sectors the same, because regulating harms in health is very difficult from lending or insurance premiums or precision medicine. It's all different, but we do need either to scale up the work of and ramp up the work of the regulators that the regulators do right now, or create new structures. I don't know, but what we need is to create that trust, and without that trust, then people are not going to buy the products, are not going to try. I mean, the CDI, the Center for Data Ethics, only 2 weeks ago released a study demonstrating how consumers are worried when a particular product is algorithmic driven, and rightly so. So, I mean, if we want to grow as a country with innovation, we've got to create the trust. Otherwise, people are not going to purchase stuff. And then I mean, there's again, another question about regulation. Regulation, there's always. So I think when we talk about regulation of AI, it's very tricky, because to me, regulating AI is a little bit like saying we regulate maths, and I don't really know what it means to regulate AI. It's a bit tricky. So what does it really mean to regulate AI? What I would like to see is very pragmatic understanding of what are the potential harms of artificial intelligence. I divide them into three. One is exclusion. So the fact that you are locked out of a particular thing. The second one is representational harm. which basically means that if you use AI in digital advertising, you end up having, for example, job ads that pay more and advertise to men, and job ads that pay less and advertise to women. And this is because of historic data. But by scaling this up, you end up perpetuating bias that are in society right now. And the third is the confusion between correlation and causation. So you can have the system saying all these things are correlated and therefore building policies onto it when there is no causation there. And this is a real problem if computation then starts taking the place of the law, and if algorithms start to make policy and become policy, if there are inherent errors in correlation and causation. So the real problem here is, how do you regulate this? I want to see a clear understanding of the harms. I want to see whether the current legislation is able to deal with these harms. I want a fitness test because we haven't done it yet. Can we do a fitness test to see whether current legislation is able to deal with the harms generated by AI? And if when we identify areas that are not covered, then we legislate. And I think, for example, anti-discrimination law might not be sufficient. Privacy and privacy law can intervene in some areas, but not in others. But I just want some clarity, and I think it's really important that rather than coming down with sweeping regulation, we do this fitness test and we do it quickly. And then there is another question, which is around, could you argue that the capitalist structure is one of the driving influences against responsible AI? Yeah, but there's $1 million question. So I'm not sure, and it'd be good to see what people think. So I think that what's happening at the moment is very much changing a lot of people's perspective in terms of the drive to purpose in innovation, the drive to purpose in business. And I think there is something, there's something happening here. But there is an uncomfortable debate, I think. And I know we've got 10 minutes left, but it's a really uncomfortable debate. And sometimes I do like tricky conversations because we need to test ourselves. But the question is, and it's pertinent to the question, Zach's question, and it's, how much can you ask corporations to do things, and business and private businesses? Sometimes I'm asked, people say, well, if society is what it is, if a bank, for example, is saying historically women have got less money because they work part-time and because so obviously when we do loans, we give them less credit. What should a bank do? Should a bank risk it in the name of, and why am I saying this? Because the answer to this is not necessarily technological, but it's political. And if a company wants to remove bias from an algorithm output, they need to make a social, political decision to envisage an outcome that is very different from society as it is now. If you are a company and you want to recruit 50% to men and 50% to women engineers, the same problem. You haven't got them in society. So you can, as a company, make that decision and say, I want 50-50. But that is a decision that you have to make and manipulate the tech to achieve that decision. Now, I work with organizations that are prepared to do that because they know that if they want customers to trust them, that they have to do it. But how much of this is up to an organization? If you have your own business, you have to make these decisions. How would you go against your risks? mitigation by overriding an outcome that is simply the outcome of society as it is. You have to make that political and social decision. This is why I say, technological artifacts are political ones and needed to be treated. They need to be treated as such. This is when we talk about this algorithms automating, there is to automate inequality. They do, because inequality is already there, and by doing so, you are simply automating them and scaling them up. And yes, so and then there's an important questions around how can I learn more about the harms of AI systems. Well, that's a great timing to do that. There are Rua Benjamin, Tech After Race After Tech.
Race After Technology.
Race After Technology. Safiya Noble, Kathy O'Neill. These are some, or maybe Dawn, you can write to everyone a list of these books.
Happy to.
Like, there's some really good stuff on that. And I would also look at the Center for Data Ethics. They've done a couple of good papers on harm, and so there's been really there's really good stuff. And also, I would also look at the white paper issued by the European Commission. So there is a lot on harms that I think is really important for people to familiarize with. And what is the control structure is a very good question. Do we need a UN approach? Do we need local regional controls? Yes. I mean, we probably need a little bit of everything. We probably need, but also I think that there is one thing that we need that we haven't talked about, which is redress. So I think there is one area that is important, is if somebody suffers from harms in through AI systems, where do we go? Where do we ask for redress? Where do we get representations? Where do we? And I think we keep saying, well, but I would like to have somewhere where I can say I've been failed by this, and get redress. So I think the redress is a big one. And the other one is going back to what we were saying earlier, is about standards and the idea that we have clarity around how a particular automated decision is being subject to due diligence. So I don't know, can we think of labeling? Can we think of something like we've got in the food industry, where you have like a label that you put and they say this is apology process, and then you have an industry level and you have the various regulator looking at this and different levels, and that could be one system, one way of doing it. There are different, there are standards that are being developed at the moment at the international level. So there is progress going on. The thing is, how do we make this really working for everybody? So not just saying, that people can really easily trust these systems, because we know that there has been some due diligence and some control. And I'm in privacy, and I'm well aware that perhaps one of the biggest battles that I'll have in front of me over the next 10 years will be around the fight to go and look at a code where the company would be saying to me, no, this is my commercial secret. I'm very much, I would love, especially in the public sector, and especially in things that relate to I would like to see these algorithms be open, so that they're published on the website, so that we can perhaps create an algorithmic league and look at these algorithms that make these decisions around big things, the big equalizers, especially in our society. The big equalizers. I mean, as one of the things that concerns me, for example, is the use of AI in education, and the idea that you look at the students' behavior and you understand how they learn, and some of it can be useful. I mean, I remember a trip to China, to Beijing, for the UNESCO conference on AI, when I was talking there. And of course, I mean, Beijing is not an easy place to go and talk about AI and privacy, but I remember that I was quite, when I went to see the schools, university, and what they were doing, it was, you know, they thought that something like that could have happened here. It was quite disturbing on the one end, but on the other end, there was some positive in there. But again, I would like to see the purpose of what we're doing first, you know, and then decide which technology is going to support it. So do we want to support students so they learn better? Yes, okay, can we see, you know, what technology is available, but the purpose first, not the tech first. And the thing is, the biggest risk of all, if there's one thing that I want people to take away, is I want tech to adapt to us and not us adapting to technology. I really don't want this to happen. And I find this pretty terrifying. And if there's something that we can do really right now, is share this thinking with as many people as possible. We've got to make this mainstream. Get involved in any possible way, whether it's in our companies, in our organizations, to look at technology, understanding the political dimensions of tech, questioning as much as possible, and join organizations that work on these issues. And you don't have to be a techie to talk about technology, because technology is much more than tech. And it's really a lot about power. It's really a lot about politics. As much as data is the least neutral thing you can find in the world, you know, there is no, so it's really getting a lot of people involved in these discussions, and really making these topics as mainstream as possible.
Thanks, Ivana. And I think that your book definitely helps with that, because it's such an easy read, and you do cover so many topics, all the issues. I feel like it's as I said before, it feels like a whistle-stop tour of all the issues. And I was going to, my final question to you was actually going to be, you sort of answered it anyway, but you know, it's clear from your book that we do need to act now. And I think one of the things that you said is that we do need to talk about, you know, talk about it. I as personally, I sort of feel a bit helpless, particularly sort of in the face of, we've got 2 minutes left, so I need to be quick, but in the face of things like Facebook and Google and everything. So, you know, the suggestion, so what can we do as ordinary citizens, I guess is my question. So read your book, talk about it, and what else? As you said, get involved in organisations and unions and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I think it's really supporting and working with these organizations from all our backgrounds. And there are loads. I mean, there's a Women Leading AI, but there are so many. There is the Algorithm Justice League. There's so many think tanks, so many organizations. And it's really, in taking part in this debate is really, really important. And questioning even organizations. I always say, when we work with our organizations in middle, you know, from junior to middle management to senior positions, it's really important that we understand that when we transform, especially moving forward, and organizations undertake digital transformation, or that they do it with us, with employees, with everybody. And actually, when I work with organizations, they actually want to do that, and they want to involve people, because they know that they can create and long-lasting innovation if they involve everybody. So just play a role in workplaces as well.
Yeah, definitely. Lovely. Somebody's asked, would you mind sharing some of the organisations you cited? And thanks for the excellent talk.
Yeah, so it's the Women Leading in AI, is Algorithmic Justice League, is the Ada Lovelace Institute, and then
the Open Data
AI Now Institute,
and the Open Data Institute as well.
Open Data.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So I've posted links in the chat to Women Leading in AI, and also the report that they did, 10 Principles of Responsible AI. If you do want to read the interview with Ivana on the conference website, I've posted a link to that as well. And you can buy Ivana's book as an ebook. I've posted a link to Amazon. But if you prefer to get from your indie bookstore, then that's available. It's being published in August, isn't it? The physical paperback. Yeah.
Even probably half July as well. We had delays.
I think the whole publishing industry's been hit by
Yes,
the
exactly.
pandemic, so it's so definitely get the ebook, everyone. So I'd like to thank Ivana very, very much for joining us tonight. It's been absolutely fantastic. I've loved hearing from you, and love your work, love your book, and thanks to everyone for joining today and for all your fantastic questions. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and hopefully see you all soon. Thanks, Ivana.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.